Greetings YouTube, this is Remarkable Republican, here once again to bring you the truth with truth-flavored bias. Today we take a look at the top 10 generals of World War II. World War II lasted for about 6 years, and there were a large number of generals who took part, but if you look at them and study the campaigns, it's clear that some of them were better than others. Here are the top 10 based on their objective talent and contribution to the war. Gerd von Rundstedt was an old man by the time World War II broke out, but he was still spry, and he held a few different commands, all of which he did well. He's most famous for the Battle of the Bulge, but he also commanded a lot of other places as well. He was considered a great soldier, and he was one of Hitler's favorites, and with good reason, because the old man usually got things done. Number 9 is the American General Omar Bradley. Bradley fought on the Western Front as a Corps and Army commander, and he was a guy who was a very skilled tactician. He never lost a battle when he was in command of the troops, and every enemy general knew that when Bradley was there, they were going to lose eventually. Bradley was kind of a nerd. He was very booky, but at the same time, he was a very good soldier, and everyone liked him. Number 8 is MASAHARU HOMMA. He was the Japanese commander in the Battle for the Philippines, and his claim to fame is that he is the only commander to ever defeat Douglas MacArthur. He was without a doubt Japan's best general. Unfortunately for them, and fortunately for the US, they decided to leave him as governor of the Philippines. Later on he was captured and accused of war crimes, but if Japan had been smart, they'd have gotten him out of there and used him elsewhere. But the Japanese weren't all that great outside of a few really good admirals and generals. Number 7 is Matthew Ridgway. This guy was basically the Patton of paratroopers. Ridgway was a hard fighter who took the men who signed up for the airborne and made them into warriors. Most of these guys were looking for an easy ride through the war, since being an airborne means you go in for a few days, you get pulled back after your operation's over, you get to rest for weeks at a time. But Ridgway volunteered his men for some tough missions. They stopped the Germans at the Bulge, and they also bailed out the British during Market Garden, producing an Allied victory out of a terrible plan by the British General Montgomery. Number 6 is Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the commander-in-chief of the Allies in Europe, and he did a really good job overseeing all of the various army operations there. He also did a really good job making sure that a lot of the very cautious and incompetent British commanders were kept in line. A lot of his men, aside from Patton, were sort of reluctant to attack, so Eisenhower had to press them to go on the offensive, and he kept everybody honest and doing what they were supposed to do. Number 5 is Erich von Manstein. Von Manstein was the best German general on the Eastern Front facing the Russians. He took a number of key cities, and he drew up some really good plans, also won pretty much every battle that he personally fought. He almost managed to relieve the city of Stalingrad, and later he won the Battle of Kursk as well. However, he was eventually relieved of command by Hitler for a number of reasons, the main one being that Manstein was having a number of homosexual relationships with some of his staff officers. Hitler found out about it, and he was afraid that if news spread that it would really undermine the morale of men at the front. So in early 1944 he removed Manstein from command, and Manstein was sidelined for the rest of the war. I would rate him a bit higher given his military skill, but the fact that he couldn't put aside his personal homosexual desires means that he wasn't as devoted or dedicated of a soldier as a lot of the other people we're going to talk about. Number 4 is Mark Clark. Clark had to work under some very difficult circumstances since his 5th Army in Sicily and Italy was under the overall command of a guy named General Harold, who was a British hard-ass who also didn't really understand strategy and had no balls. So Clark was always trying to accomplish things, and Harold was always holding him back. Eventually, Clark managed to capture Rome against Harold's orders, and then that led the Allies to remove Harold in favor of Clark, and once he was in actual command, he managed to smash through the German line, break the stalemate, and win the war in Italy. So Mark Clark was great, and if he had full command from an early date, there's no telling what he could have accomplished. But unfortunately, he was held back by the stupidity of the British, just like Ridgway and a number of other guys. Number 3 is Douglas MacArthur. During World War II, MacArthur commanded all of the U.S. armies fighting in the Pacific, and aside from losing the Philippines and a couple of other really small places early on when the Japanese used their ruses and surprise attacks to take stuff, MacArthur won every battle that he fought. So he had to go into a lot of these really difficult jungle islands and basically burn people out, and MacArthur always managed to pull that off, so he is an excellent general without very few equals. Number 2 is Erwin Rommel. He was a German general who fought in North Africa against the British. He kicked their ass pretty hard until the Americans arrived in West Africa. Then he actually beat up the Americans, but eventually got surrounded and annihilated because he didn't have enough supplies. Later on, he was the German commander at Normandy, and he actually had the Allies bottled up, but then he was removed from command after Hitler decided that he was responsible for the bomb plot. Had Rommel lived, the war would have gone on a lot longer, and also if he had been put in the East, he probably would have won some great battles, but he wasn't, and that is good for the US, and we just got past July 4th, so I think we can safely celebrate that fact. Number 1 should come as no surprise to anyone who knows anything about World War II history, and that is General George S. Patton. Every military historian of the war agrees that Patton was the very best commander. There's not really much debate. The Germans may have invented Blitzkrieg, but it was Patton who's the only guy to perfect it. His drives with the armor were a thing of legend. He broke out of Normandy where everybody else failed. When he got into the open country, he tore ass. One of his divisions became known as the 1st Armored Hell on Wheels Division. He eventually managed to defeat the German attack at the Battle of the Bulge by getting his tanks there faster than the Germans thought possible, and he helped to relieve the airborne units there who were holding down the fort. Patton was easily the most important general of the war and broke the back of Germany after 6 years of war. So he did something that other generals only dreamt of doing. Unfortunately, Patton died right after the war ended, and he did not get to bask in his glory, and he never had a chance to command in Korea or Vietnam, where he probably could have made things go a lot easier for America. Until next time, I'm Remarkable Republican, bringing the truth with truth-flavored bias, signing out.